तान्तेजसा भवतु ते जय मंगलानि मारातिरेक माबियुजित संभरान्तिं गोरं पना नवकमंग matadnd yakkhang khanti sudant vidina jitva muninindo तान्तेजसा भवतु ते जय मंगलानि नालागिरिं गजवरं आतिमन्त भूतं दावंगी चंक मासनीव सुतारुनन्तं नितंबुसेक विदिना जितवा मुनिंदो तान्तेजसा भवतु ते जय मंगलानि
Thank you, Mahasangha and distinguished guests. That was Sharada Dr. Harshini Rajapaksha, who recited the Jayamangala Gatha in her melodious voice. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajapaksha. Now, I kindly invite Dr. A.T. Aryaratna, the founder of the Sarvodaya Shramadana movement and the local host of the Metta Convention 2014, to deliver the welcome address and declare the second International Metta Convention open.
On behalf of the second generation of Sarvodaya leaders, led by Dr. Charika Marasinghe and her young team of second and third generation Sarvodaya workers and the Aloka Foundation, I have great joy in welcoming all of you to this historic Metta Convention. First of all, I would like to welcome all the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis who are our venerable guests for this week. You have come from various parts of the world because you all believe in one world, one people, one humanity, one living species. So you are most welcome, dear respected bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, and other religious leaders. Then I would be very happy to welcome all those who consented to come and enlighten us with their experience for last maybe 3 or 4 decades in service of humanity, following the spirit and the science of Metta. I don't think the organizers would like me revealing a secret. Out of thousands of people we invited, there was one response, one postcard. You terrible fools, what are you trying to do? That means there are very intelligent people who think that non-metta or hatred is the way that you can solve world problems. So, when there are people like that, educated, first-class, ignorant people, we fools have to do this kind of thing. So I would like to thank everybody who contributed in this foolish act, which would be the most intelligent act that happened in our country in recent times. The Sarvodaya movement is not something that is suddenly springing up, going down. No. We are a continuous activity for the last 56 years under this name. Similarly, the great traditions of various faiths, Hinduism, which is the most ancient, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all these great religions have had love, loving kindness, metta in their heart. So what we are trying to do is to continue on that tradition under the guidance of a great spiritual master, Venerable Bhante Mahinda. Venerable Bhante Mahinda is a product of all 3 main Buddhist traditions and also an embodiment of the spirit of all other religions. He is young compared to me. So long after we are dead and gone, who are above now 11 years, 8 plus 3 is 11, right? He will continue to enlighten humanity. When he gave us this idea, we approached our Kirama Imalajoti Hamdru and said, your colleague, because both of them belong to the same teacher, right? Venerable Kirinde Dhammananda. He said, I am with you 100%. So the Buddhist Cultural Center, which was founded and headed by him, which had done a unique service to humanity in the service of preserving and propagating Buddha's teachings around the world, publishing every possible piece of Dhamma he could lay his hand on. So that unique service he has done to propagate the teachings of the Buddha, I said, is enough for him. more than any other thing he attempted to do, or he attempts to do, like reforming other people. So he will stick to go along with us on this path. So I'm so happy that Kiramahandro backed us to the hilt, which gave us all the encouragement. Then we approach Venerable Kottapala Dhammakirti Hamdro, Amarkirti Hamdro, who is bringing together over 1 million people every year at Anuradhapura on the, say, July, Poson, Asala full moon day. So we will be joining the 1 million people he will be bringing along with them on the 5th of July, and Venerable Mahinda will make us meditate from 9:45 to 10:15 on that day, so that not only within the country, around the world, we can spread the message. Science and technology is not only a privilege of governments. Foolish rulers in certain countries think that they can control the people by controlling the media. Now, yesterday we did an event which was broadcast around the world without any formal permission from anybody. That is technology. So let freedom of expression, freedom to get information be a part and part of our democratic life. So during this period, including this ceremony, up to the 5th midnight, there will be a live broadcast, webcast around the world for those who wish to see what's happening in the field of metta, in the field of sacrifice, in the field of not lobha but alobha, not dvesha but advesha, not avidya but vidya. So this is an international, universal world event. So these three monks guided us. Then came the Professor and Mrs. Ambuldeniya into the scene. They said, "We will shoulder your burden." So those two are present here, and they gave us more and more strength. Not to me, but to the second generation led by Charika. Charika kept me uninformed about even this moment. He said, "You don't have to worry, you just rest." Rest is a very dirty word. When the Prime Minister of India in 1978 came to Sri Lanka, I was 7.5 hours away from Colombo. He sent me a call. "I am in Sri Lanka, you have no business to leave Colombo." When I am here, Mr. Moraji Desai called me. I said, "Sir, I am at another function. Give up that function, come back to Colombo." So I rushed back to Colombo at the demand of your Prime Minister of India, Mr. Moraji Desai. He said, "Ari, I don't trust your Prime Minister." These are the very words. "I don't trust your leader of the opposition. I don't trust anybody in your country. I trust you because you are a Gandhian. Tell me the truth. What's happening in this country? I need to know about it because at 10 o'clock I'm addressing your parliament. So I must know the truth, what to say." So I told him the exact truth as I saw it, because we can see the truth from different perspectives. He gave a brilliant speech to Parliament in 1978, February 4th. If our leaders followed that statement, we would never have had this 30 years of bloodshed in our country. Unfortunately, most leaders, when they are in power, they have deaf ears. They are blind to reality. But that does not mean that we, the people in our countries, should remain quiet. We have one weapon in our hand, that is our power of the heart, which means power of the mind. Because mind exists in heart according to our Eastern philosophy. So what we are trying to do is to heal the hearts of people which have been affected by 30 years of competition, war, hatred and conflicts. Therefore what we are doing is a historical event which we will continue even after the 5th of July. We have here the person who discovered where exactly Prince Siddhartha was born, where Buddha Bodhisattva was born in Lumbini. That is Professor Bidari. Get up! Basant Bidari. He could not be introduced yesterday. He could not be introduced yesterday because he disappeared into the crowd. I was looking everywhere to bring him and hand him over to Charika to introduce him to the audience. He was not. But now I've caught him there and we brought him here. Please look at him on the 7th evening, 7th of next month, 5 p.m. at the Sambuddha Jayanti building in Colombo. He will be showing all those how he discovered the place where Buddha, the Siddhartha, the Prince Siddhartha was born. So it will be a very important occasion for you, especially the Buddhists, to know a historical fact and historical Buddha. Then, yesterday as we introduced our distinguished speakers, I am not going to introduce all of them again now, but I should mention a word about Bhante Vimala, who is seated here. Bhante Vimala follows the footsteps of the monks that Buddha wanted to follow, not living in one place. Now, he has been with us for 3 days. Now, that is the longest time I think he has been in one place. He came straight from New York to participate in this. Now he is going straight to Philippines to hand over the church building, not of this temple building, church building, schools and all that he built for the tsunami victims. So he's an exemplary monk we have produced from Sri Lanka and endowed to the world. So we have Bhante Vimala here. So I have been working under the instructions of my daughter. She came and told me, now shut up. So I am not going to say anything more. I will welcome all of you with great love and affectionate feelings, people from all countries, including Israel. Israel representative Stani and his wife invited Bhante Mahinda to have the next one in Israel. Don't be afraid that we all may have to go to Israel and bring these conflicting, ignorant groups of leaders, Arabs and Israelis. They are ignorant because they are fighting. They are fighting in Jesus Christ's land. A land where great religious leader was born. So we have to bring them together and bring Vidya to the Avidya world. So we tried it. They are not expected to go to the Arab lands. But when I went last time, I smuggled them myself because I was traveling with the ambassador and security didn't stop the car. They were in the car and we had a discussion between Arab and Israeli leaders how to bring peace. Therefore, maybe with that remark, putting the responsibility on them to get us down there, I conclude, may you all be well and happy. May you all enjoy this great moment where we will deeply engage ourselves in the Dhamma. Thank you again. Thank you very much. Welcome. Ina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ari. We apologize for cutting you short, as although it's an illuminating and interesting speech, we just have to make sure that, excuse me, our Mahasangha do not miss the Dana time. Venerable Mahinda Thero, I most respectfully invite you to conduct a couple of minutes of Metta meditation and share a few opening remarks on the theme, the science of Metta. I will guide you on how to get on. Yeah, to the stage.
I sit up there. I can't stand to talk. That's it. You got it.
You can get up from here. You can get up from here. Give your mic, man.
Okay. From here. Okay. If you like to adjust your body to an upright and relaxed position, you may choose to close or half close your eyes. Bring your attention within. Observe the calm, the quietness within. Remain in this state of calm and quietness for a few moments, with clear sense of awareness. Whatever phenomena that arises, the sounds that you hear, feelings, sensation that arises, you have clear awareness of them. Your mind is not disturbed, not distracted. In this state of calm and quietness, you will commence with the practice of metta, of loving kindness, wishing yourselves to be well and happy. As you wish yourselves to be well and happy, feel a sense of well-being. And keep a smile in your hearts. Be free from anger, free from enmity, from hatred and grudges, free from sufferings, from fear, from worries, from anxieties, and just dwell in calm and peace. Just as you wish to be well and happy, calm and peaceful, you will now spread out loving kindness all around you. Feel the calm, the quietness within radiating above, below, and all around you. Fill this whole hall with your aura of calm and peace, and a good wish in your hearts that all who are present be well and happy. Going beyond the confines of this hall, to all the surrounding areas, to the whole premises of the Sarodaya highest center of learning. That all beings, all that dwells within this premises, known or unknown to us, seen or unseen, may they be well and happy. May they be free from harm, free from dangers. May they dwell in peace and harmony. Going beyond these premises to all the surrounding areas, to the whole of Pantaragama, spreading out the whole country, the whole island of Sri Lanka. Beyond this country to all the neighboring countries, all the neighboring islands, covering the whole world. And all the realms of existence, known or unknown to us, seen or unseen, that may all beings be well and happy. May they be free from harm, free from dangers. May they dwell in peace and harmony. All beings be well and happy. Fill your hearts with pure love and compassion, and cherish the good wish that all suffering beings be free from suffering. Those in sorrow be free from sorrow. Those in fear and dangers, may they be free from fear and dangers. May they dwell in peace and harmony. That may all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Venerable members of the Sangha, distinguished panelists, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. I can see that you are sweating, many of you, but it's for a good cause, I assure you. You all have come from far and near. You have made so much sacrifices to come for this convention. But I say to you, it is very difficult, very rare opportunity that you have to meet the personality of Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne, who is an embodiment of Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and a little bit of Upekkha. Not yet fully yet, yeah. But one day he will reach there, yeah. And we will support. We need all your help that we will support, that he will transcend, because we need him to come back, yeah. And in the personality of our keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Beckwith, You know, long time ago, I have been wanting to find out what is the equivalent of metta in the other spiritual traditions. I came across this word agape. It is a Greek word. It is the closest that we can get to loving kindness. It's the unconditioned love. It's, you can say, God's love. The love for all sentient beings. And it's no wonder that Reverend Dr. Mike Beckwith had to start a spiritual center of his own, calling it agape, because the religions of today that claims the Godhead, that speaks about love, their love, their concept of love, is only confined to their own religious people. God loves my people, but God does not care for your other people. That is the hypocrisy of it all. That is why Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith has come about this agape. We thank him for coming here all the way. Yesterday and today you will be hearing presentations from 3 women from India that has brought about reformation. 3 great daughters of India, Mother India. You know, to find one, you go to India to try to find one, you can't get. Not so easy to reach them. But today, we get all 3 of them. Not only all 3 of them, all these people here. These are the bringing together of love and compassion, caring, not only for oneself, but for the world at large. Professor James Doty, who were presenting to you the science of metta, he spoke on this issue that our very chemistry, the very physiology of our own being is actually support, comes from that love, that compassion within. It is through this love and compassion, as we said just now, you feel a sense of calm and quietness. And if you practice more and more, those of you who have high blood pressure, your pressure will come down. But not just one go. I remember Dr. Mara Singha came for a retreat at Alokarama. And he took all their pulse and their high blood pressure. And they found after the next 2 days, their pressure came up instead of coming down. And I also have seen, when I meditate, my pressure seems to come up. But after that, after some time, it comes down and it stabilizes. Yeah? Now, metta has the power to heal. I'll talk more about this later, but today I would like to tell you that metta has the power to heal cancer cells. Check out with Dr. Mara Singha. We invited him to conduct a workshop metta in the womb, in pregnant mothers, because he has done here in Sri Lanka for more than 20,000 pregnant mothers, starting metta from the womb. And that is hard. That is what we need to do. We need to inculcate these values. Another comment from Professor James Doty yesterday was about the theory of evolution by Charles Darwin. I studied this when I was in university, and I figured something was not quite right. It was the interpretation of the survival of the fetus. What idea do you get survival of the fetus? If you are strong, you bully others, then you survive. Probably you will survive a little bit longer, but not evolve. You probably devolve. Yeah? I actually was not happy with theory about the human brain, how the brains of human sapien developed to that big. According to certain scholars that say that it's because of the violence that the brain developed. I was not happy with that. And my professor, associate professor, was not happy with me too. So I failed his paper. That's how I became a monk eventually. Otherwise, I would be a scientist today. Yeah, a neurosurgeon. Anyway, certainly, it's not the survival of the fittest in that sense. What he said, he mentioned is that it is compassion, the cooperation and compassion that provides the kind of ambience where evolution can take place. And this is something very important that we all need to evolve. We, as human beings, you looked at one another. Yesterday I told you how empty we are. Do you still remember? We are 99.999 degrees empty, percent empty. Actually, as humans, we are beings of light. And these have been proved by monks. On my visit to Tibet, I learned of how monks, when they practice, when they realize the emptiness of this being, when they die, their body shrink. The body shrink to 1 foot if they have not fully accomplished. When they have fully accomplished, their body totally disappear with only a few strands of hair and a few nails. That is that 0.001%. This is what we are here. Metta is that value. Metta is that which will be able to open our hearts, make our mind clear, be able to see the reality of ourselves. And that is how, when we are able to go beyond our sensory perception, that is why meditation is needed. Our senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, we rely too much on them. Our eyes can only see a certain spectrum of light. Our ears can only hear a certain wavelength. We do not have all this. That is why we got to go beyond our sensory perception through meditation. And through love, we open our hearts. No one can actually develop the mind without opening the hearts. I have tried. I could not. I tried on other participants, students, they cannot open their hearts. Their minds will not develop if they have anger, if their hearts are closed. That is why metta is so important, to open the hearts, to develop the mind, to see the true reality of life, and then we see we are one. Thank you.
Our sincere gratitude, Venerable Thero. Before we begin this morning's talks, I cordially invite our British concert musicians, Mr. Simon Marlowe and Miss Shula Oliver, who have kindly traveled a long way to be with us here today at the Metta Convention, to open this morning session with a beautiful piece of music. Thank you very much, Simon and Shula, for those splendid few moments. I'm sure you can remember what a beautiful evening we had yesterday at the inauguration ceremony of the Metta Convention, during which all speakers introduced you. Therefore, without taking any more of your time, I would now like to hand over the stage to Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith, who will be the chairperson for this morning's session on the science of Metta. Reverend Beckwith, over to you to introduce our two speakers and facilitate this morning.
As I indicated yesterday, that compassion, of course, is one of the highest forms of love, for it is the understanding of a lack of understanding. It is the embracing each and every one of us, regardless of agreement, regardless of sharing the same perception, the same points of view, or the same experiences. It is why we are here today, to come to a greater understanding of the science of metta, and to allow for our full potential to be activated. Interestingly enough, bliss corresponds to the activation of potential. That when our potential is activated, we enter into states of bliss. There's a direct correspondent to each of us becoming more of ourselves. There's an activation of more bliss and more love, and we mature into the art of loving to be loving, without any object whatsoever. We don't have to love someone. We just love to love. We love to be in peace. We love to be in the vibration of compassion. So we are here today and tomorrow to be together in the Sangha of Metta and to understand the science and the art of loving to love, the activation of compassion, being a candidate for spaces and activation of bliss and ecstasy that comes from the fulfillment of our deep potential. It is my joy to moderate this particular session with two powerful and wonderful speakers. The first individual that I will bring to the stage at this moment is Dr. James Doty. Some of you who were here yesterday got a chance to hear a little bit of him speaking of his background and speaking of the science of meditation. And so if you weren't here yesterday, his biography is right here in the program. I just want to remind you that he's the professor of neurosurgery at Stanford University, the School of Medicine, and the founder and director of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at the Stanford University. The center, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama as the founding benefactor, aims to support rigorous research on compassion. It collaborates with scientists from a number of disciplines, examining the neural basis for compassion and altruism. As Venerable Mahinda reminded us, he mentioned to us that we're hardwired for compassion and kindness. It's part of our intrinsic nature. We're here to participate in that. Please welcome Dr. James Doty.
Thank you, Mike. How are you? You can do better than that. Come on. 1, 2, 3. Welcome. It's really a joy to be with you today. It's interesting what Michael was saying, how bliss corresponds to potential, how our physiology is actually aligned so that when we are caring and compassionate, that's when our physiology works best. You know, at home, my home, I have a statue of a headless Buddha. And it's a modern piece of sculpture, and the Buddha is, in its hands, has a persimmon. And the reason I was attracted to that sculpture was twofold. And it was interesting. He was saying how he was, if he had not become a monk, he may have been a scientist or a neurosurgeon. I think I'm heading in the other direction, perhaps. But the reason I got that sculpture was by being headless, what it reminds me is to think with my heart and not with my head. Because sometimes when you think with your head, it doesn't always answer the most important aspect of a question. The other thing is about a persimmon, if any of you have eaten persimmons, is how do they start out? They start out very hard and they start out bitter. But if you take time, if you are patient, they become sweet and soft. And that is the path. And by taking the time, by thinking with intent, it allows you to taste that fruit, that soft fruit, and allows you to transcend. Now, before I start talking about purely science, I wanted to tell you a story also about the heart. When scientists first started studying meditation, metta, compassion, it was with Buddhist monks. And it was because Buddhism has developed a taxonomy of the language of inner life that's quite complex and actually quantifiable. But when these monks went to Dharamsala, when these scientists went to Dharamsala, the method that was being used to measure the function of the brain was an electroencephalogram. And I don't know if any of you have seen the picture. It's a cap with all these electrodes coming from it, and you see the monk sitting there with it. And when the scientists, as they were demonstrating how this was going to work for the monks, and they put it on one of the scientists' head, all the monks started laughing. Now, the scientists, of course, thought the reason they were laughing was just because it was a strange-looking contraption. But when the monks were queried, the monk said, obviously you don't know what you're doing because compassion is here. And in fact, science actually is demonstrating that, in fact, what they said was true. You know, I also said yesterday at the wonderful opening that many wish to go to the West from what we call third world countries. But actually, why would you want to come to a place where there is an epidemic of isolation, loneliness, and depression, when in fact your own spiritual traditions are some of the most wise and insightful, and in fact, look what happened. Scientists came from the West to learn from the East and prove what you already knew. But that is how it works. Because the other thing we know is that these incredible traditions that work, that have impact, that allow one to transcend, those cannot be translated oftentimes to a secular environment unless we have science to quantify and, frankly, to prove benefit. And that is what I am interested in. You know, some of the people who I work with, it is not surprising that they have an orientation towards Buddhism or some other Eastern religious practices. And I tell them, I am not so much interested in those practices, I am interested in the results of those practices. And they look at me a little bit funny, and I said, if someone came who was a Mormon, if someone came from Scientology, and they had practices that I could demonstrate had an impact, and we could remove the religious context of it, I would be happy to use that as well. In fact, I think that's what the Buddha said. If you can demonstrate to yourself that there are practices that offer enlightenment, then you should examine those and not only be aligned with your own practice. So I spoke yesterday a little bit about evolution, and what I said was that to have what we call theory of mind, to have abstract thinking, to have complex language, resulted in a requirement for enlargement of our brain. As a result, that increased the gestational period, and it also resulted in our offspring to have to be taken care of for about a decade and a half before they could survive independently. In my case, I have a daughter who's 32, and it is extending apparently 3 decades. That being said, though, as a result of this child requiring the care and nurturing of the infant for a decade and a half, the result is that we are imprinted within our genetics this incredible capacity for care and nurturing. And that is why a mother will not abandon her child. That is why she will die for her child, because that bond is so deep and that attachment is so strong. And it is that unconditional love, it is that recognition of the pain of another and the desire to intervene that has allowed our species to survive. And in fact, as I was saying earlier, Darwin said it is not survival of the fittest. What he said is survival of the most sympathetic. And scientists have demonstrated this now in multiple studies, that while ruthless behavior can give a short-term result, it is compassion, kindness, openness that allows a species to survive as a species. And it is what will allow our species to survive. One of the tools that we use to measure compassion, if you will, is examining the area in the brain associated with reward. This is also the area of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, or the caudate, that is associated with other reward behaviors, such as the acquisition of food, the money, or even sex. Believe it or not, sex is pleasurable for some people. We won't go there right now. But what's interesting is that when someone does a compassionate act for another person, that area of reward lights up or shows an increase in metabolism more so then associated oftentimes with other of these behaviors. In fact, my colleagues and I did a study related to students who were given money and they had a choice about how that money was spent. And this study has been done in different ways with the same results. And the results are that if someone gives the money to themselves for their own benefit, it lights up a little, but that area of metabolism quickly goes down. If you give the money to another, that area of metabolism lights up much more. The extraordinary thing is that if the individual has the money and there is an arbitrary system that chooses where that money goes, while they watch this, if the money is given to another without their permission, that same area of pleasure and reward lights up. And what that tells us is that even if you don't want to, when you see another being served, when you show caring for another, when you give to another, it has a remarkable effect in making you feel good yourself. Now, these are latent abilities that we have. And I say latent because they are there, we don't have to do anything. Let me tell you about a couple other studies. There was a study that was done, and it asked males and females what they most value in a partner. Now, what do you think men chose? Men chose attractiveness, physical attractiveness. What women chose was a perception that the individual was a good provider. But the thing that stood out in both groups, far beyond either of those, was that the individual was kind. Kindness wins out over beauty when one looks for a partner. It wins out over the fact that even they can be a good provider. Because again, that is the core which defines who we are. You know, I mentioned earlier about the head being connected to the heart and the power of the heart, and how science has shown this in many ways to be true. One of the greatest causes of sudden cardiac death, or you dropping dead from a heart attack, is something called a lack of heart rate variability. And extraordinarily, if one practices compassion and caring with intent, the incidence of sudden cardiac death drops dramatically. So you see, there is a connection with your heart. The other interesting thing is that our physiology is remarkably attuned to caring for others. How does that work? We talked about the pleasure centers in the brain, but let's talk about a couple of other aspects. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was something called the flight or fight response. and also a desire to be part of a tribe. And I said that these were the two components of our evolution that actually impede one from being at their baseline of caring and being compassionate. And what happens? When we see another, or we see another who is not like us, particularly, or we are in an environment where it is unknown to us, it is different, it is strange, we respond by a part of our brain called the amygdala. And that part of our brain then has to make some decisions because it is finally attuned to threat. So it has to decide if you're going to run away or if you're going to fight. And it does this analysis on a subconscious level because it is a holdover, if you will, from when we were reptiles, and it is a very old and ancient part of our brain. It also has a component where it can respond to things with disgust or distaste. And this is associated, as an example, with seeing certain things occur or tasting bad food that could be dangerous. So when we have an encounter, we have to first decide whether it's a threat to us. If it is appears to be a threat, what happens is that a part of our autonomic nervous system, which is represented not only in our heart, but throughout our entire body, gets engaged. The one part of our autonomic nervous system, which is the fear, flight, or fight response, or the fear response, is the sympathetic nervous system. So if you were in the savannah or on the savannah in Africa and a lion appeared, your sympathetic tone, or that part of your nervous system, would dramatically increase. You would release an immense number of hormones. Your blood pressure would go up. The blood supply from your organs would be transferred to your muscles, and it would allow you to run away very quickly. And if you survived, everything came back down to normal. If you did not survive, it didn't really matter. But that response, the opposite of that response, is in fact our default mode. That is the part of us that allows us to be calm. That is the part of us that allows us to embrace another. That is the part of us that is associated with something called flow or creativity. It is the part of us that when it is engaged, or if you will, the vagus nerve, which is the nerve of your heart, the tone is increased. That allows for what we call the executive control area in the front part of our brain, which allows us to consciously interpret events with memory and other components. That is when we actually function the best. Now, all of us have a genetic capacity for compassion or metta. And the problem is, if we were to have a bell-shaped curve, which is how everything is demonstrated, where would most of us lie if this is low and this is high? Would all of us be on the high part? Probably not. Now, there are some people who may have a natural capacity for being on that high part, like the Dalai Lama, Dr. Airy, Desmond Tutu, and a number of other individuals. And then there are others who are on the part where there is no compassion. And in fact, trying to convert those people is a waste of time. sociopaths, Wall Street bankers. No, I shouldn't say that. Anyway, most of us, though, fall in the middle, and most of us are on the low side. But the extraordinary thing is that we have the ability, if you will, to adjust our thermostat. And what is the value proposition of adjusting that thermostat to its highest potential? And let me drop back for a second, though, to show you an example of the genetic distribution related to compassion, if you will, or caring or connection. Does anybody know what a vole is? V-O-L-E? It's a rodent. And there are two types. There's one type that the male is monogamous, stays with the female throughout the lifetime, has children, nurtures the children. Then there's another type of vole where the male is not monogamous, but in fact is everywhere trying to impregnate every female and abandons them as soon as he chooses to. Interestingly, in that species, there is a gene defect or variation that where the voles that are monogamous, they have a type of oxytocin, or what we call the love or nurturing hormone, that is actually much more represented and much more powerful in that species than the other species. So it shows you, in fact, and this isn't the full answer to compassion or caring, but it gives you a hint that clearly there are genes involved. But as I was saying earlier, the wonderful thing, though, is that gene representation doesn't mean a fixed point. It means you have a capacity, because there is the ability to affect the amount those genes are expressed, or the epigenetics. And what we know is that through the practice of metta, or a compassion meditation, that we can in fact maximize our genetic potential for compassion and caring. And what happens when you do that? We have a course that was developed at Stanford, but there are others that use a type of compassion meditation or loving kindness meditation, and we train people over an 8-week period. And what are the things that we have found? First of all, the people who, at the end of the course, when they are surveyed, say they are calmer, they do not have as much emotional reactivity, they have better relationships with their partners, and they are much more open to the other or people who are not like them. The other thing that happens is that over the long term, they have a decrease in their blood pressure. The hormones that are associated with stress, such as cortisol, are markedly decreased. And the immune system is strengthened. The other interesting thing is that there is evidence that you can increase a part of your gene, what's called the telomere, and by lengthening that, that is associated with an increase in longevity. And so this type of meditation can, in fact, increase your life. There was a study that was done in women over the age of 65 who did volunteer work or service to others. And this was what is called a self-report study. those women who did a certain number of volunteer hours of service, they had up to a 2 times or a double in life expectancy compared to their peers, with 2 exceptions. If the individual said that the reason they were doing the act of service was to receive benefit, such as an award or recognition, they did not reap the benefit. Or if they were doing the act to impress another person. So what this tells you is that while some people try to fake it, unless you are sincere and are authentic, you will not receive the benefit of metta or service to others. It has to be genuine. But when it in fact is genuine, it is extraordinarily powerful. The other aspect of this is when you are in the state of metta, when you are demonstrating compassion, this is putting you in the place of connecting with others, and this is the place where, frankly, we function the best, is in connecting to others. I give a lecture sometimes, and it's called The Difference Between Transformation and Transcendence. Many of you know that in the West especially, mindfulness is now a term that is used by everyone. And there may be 50 different definitions. And I think mindfulness is wonderful. It makes you focused. It gives you awareness. It gives you the ability to be present in the moment. But unless, and what's happened is that practice has been taken from a Buddhist practice and has been stripped to make it secular. The problem sometimes, though, is that the components that made it very powerful in a good way, besides attention and presence, is the component that gave insight and wisdom. When you remove those components, which are an inherent part of that practice, what can happen with some people is a wonderful technique to become more self-absorbed and narcissistic, especially for a type A personality, and I see these sometimes at Stanford and other places. In fact, there was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal how hedge fund managers have now discovered mindfulness to make them a better hedge fund manager. In this article, there was not one word about compassion. There was not one word about loving kindness. There was not one word about caring for others. There was not one word about philanthropy and giving away this massive amounts of money which you could not possibly spend in your lifetime to others. It was strictly about how I can become more ruthless by having more attention and focus. That is the downside of mindfulness alone. So while this type of practice can result in transformation, it is a journey of one. It is an inward journey, and it can have the components which I just mentioned. But I think the most important journey one can take is not that type of a transformation. It is a different type of transformation, and that is transcendence. Transcendence is knowing your place in the world, knowing your purpose, and a recognition that each of us is deeply connected to the other, And when we hurt others, when we are not kind to others, then we are hurting ourselves. This is transcendence. This is a journey that is not done alone. It is not an inward journey. It is an outward journey of connection. It is when you practice metta, it is when you practice compassion, that not only are you physiologically at your best, but it is what will define you as a human, by defining your purpose in this world, defining your connection to all, and ultimately defining your humanity, and ultimately it is what will save our species. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doty, for that illuminating speech. To introduce our next speaker, who is an outstanding personality, who was unable to be with us yesterday at the inauguration ceremony, I now again respectfully call upon Dr. Beckwith.
Let's once again give Dr. James Doty some more love and appreciation. After this next speaker, there will be an opportunity to engage both of them in a question and answer period that I will help facilitate. The next individual is, of course, Mr. Sumana Ratnayaka. He's the senior lecturer on Buddhist studies at the University of Peradeniya. But his most relevant work for today's session is on science of metta, happens to be his PhD thesis, which is pending. His pending doctorate is entitled Mindfulness, Classical and Modern Interpretations. He has started a Buddhist Sangha in Stockholm. He's lectured in over 17 countries. And he's here today to continue the dialogue on the science of metta. Please give him some love and appreciation. Thank you.
Good morning to you all. Venerable members of the Mahasangha, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. My presentation is going to be ready soon. Until it is going to be ready, let us meditate. I think it takes a couple of minutes, it seems. However, you have accumulated quite a lot from Dr. Doty and Venerable Mahinda, Venerable Bhante Vimal, and some other speakers, like great renowned speakers here. So you have a lot in your head and heart. If you join them together, I think that reflection itself is what we call metta practice. If I present anything here, I would invite you to blend it with whatever you heard from Dr. Doty and also from Venerables and also our great Akate. I don't know how to pronounce that particular word anyway. That is name. Huh? Dr. Michael. Yeah, sorry. Well, let us keep a little straight back for a while and reflect on whatever we heard already and focus your attention on your breathing for a while. Honestly, pay attention to your breath and honestly feel that you enjoy it. Enjoy your breath for a little while. The simplicity of breathing in, the simple process of breathing out gives us a lot of love. Entire movement, Sarvodaya, and all your presence here is a practice of metta. I think it's a blessing that you are all here today. This way of reflecting on these aspects is a practice of metta, at least a motivation. As Bhante Vimal always repeats, it is a motivational inspiration. That is very useful. I always repeat, any of your wonderful practices in terms of mindfulness, mindfulness of breathing, or mindfulness of cooking, mindfulness of drinking tea, mindfulness of working in a kitchen, mindfulness of helping each other, preparing a cup of tea for another, even for yourself. All this is practice of metta. Metta is the foundation on which you find a lot of links. So you may soon see that I started my presentations with 3 great qualities that you all have. What are these 3 qualities? One is effort. The other is understanding. Still another, mindfulness. These 3 qualities are linked very well with metta. Without your heart, you cannot link them. These are very important key aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. I also started my presentation, you may see in a while. Is it there? Can I see it? Maybe I can, yeah, I can see now. Yes. You may just have a look at the presentation. Yes. I say something very crucially important there. There is no path to peace because peace is the path. There is no path to loving kindness because loving kindness is the path. There is no path to compassion because compassion is the path. There is no path to, sorry? Liberation, very important word. Because liberation is the path. These sayings I summarized based on what I have been practicing from my childhood, having learned from any speaker, anybody. Buddha says, Parato Ghosa is important for us to have right understanding. Reflection into ourselves. Reflection on Dhamma or mindfulness practice Yoniso Manasikara, that is really the wise and systematic attention to how we are, whatever we experience, our little breath. This experience is important. So reflection on this is altogether developing right understanding. So anything that you aim at should not be the aim postponed. It should be a practice here and now. So we say the path of love, path of loving kindness, not path to loving kindness. It is not path to peace, it is path of peace. It is not path to Nibbana, it is path of Nibbana. It is not path to enlightenment, it is path of enlightenment. I hope you will reflect on this eventually. May I just have a look at the screen here? Sorry. I use these three words from the Eightfold Path. Atapi, Sampajano, Satima. These three words you hear from the Satipatthana Sutta and also Anapanasati Sutta and some other suttas. Atapi Sampajano Satima. Atapi means a person who has effort, who makes efforts. That is Atapi. Second is a person who is aware, understanding. That is Sampajanyo. The person who has mindfulness is Satima. It's very important to notice the connection between them. And that connection is built always with love, with metta. So right effort, right understanding, and right mindfulness are the key issues or the key concepts or the links of the path. So when you reflect on the path again, starting with these three major characteristics: effort, understanding, mindfulness. Then you find right attitudes, speech, action, livelihood. Are they not our experiences? Mental composure, that is collectedness. Collectedness of wholesome qualities, that is what we call samadhi. Samadhi is kusala chitta ekaggata. Collectedness of kusala, all wholesome qualities. All what we named here are the kusala, wholesome characteristics. I have some arrows drawn now. One after the other you notice. Effort is connected with right attitude or right thought. Then understanding is connected. Mindfulness is connected. Without mindfulness, understanding and effort, we cannot practice any right attitude. So we need to have these clusters, collectedness of these practices. These connections are based on love. These connections are based on our heart. Heart and head joined together. You find with these arrows. So these arrows will point out the major three characteristics on top. Effort, understanding, and mindfulness are always connected to whatever you saw underneath. So mental composure is a result. And that result is not separated. It is not a single thing. It is together with all others. So whenever we practice, we need to have these sort of links, relationships. Even to reflect on breathing, we may think that, oh, it is only breath that we need to focus on. I think it is a misunderstanding. It is not only breath. At least two things will go together. It is breath plus knowing. We have to recognize breathing. And also we have to breathe. recognition and breathing. That will produce some results. So very important keyword is recognition. We will come across that. Mindfulness, let us go into, because we have been talking about it here repeatedly, and I am also doing my research on it, finding more and more interpretations, especially classical and modern. Modern focusing on Sri Lankan practices. So mindfulness is very much what we have already reflected on. This is the summary of mindfulness. The one aspect of it, as the dictionary offers, original meaning is memory, because it is from smruti, samarati, sumarati, and smarati, and all these words come from in connection with sati. So mindfulness, before mindfulness, memory, reflection, remembrance. Second meaning is what we really focus on in Buddhist perspective, in Buddhist practice. That is mindfulness, that is being awake, that is again to be here and now, to be with the present moment, non-judgmental observation, awareness, bare attention. There are more, of course, as Dhoti also said briefly, and also there are many interpretations. But with these interpretations, we need to have something important in mind. Why do we need these interpretations? Why do we need all these? Buddha, for 45 years, he lived and he practiced and he preached. If you want to find the summary of the Buddha's teaching, you find it in the Alagadupama Sutta, Sutta number 22 of Majjhima Nikaya. And that is the parable of snake. There Buddha says, Pubbechaham bhikkhave etrahi dukkhancha panyapemi dukkasacha nirodham. Meaning, formerly and now, O monks, I teach only two things: suffering and the way out of suffering. Suffering and the cessation of suffering. So that is important. Suffering is not a very beautiful word. Therefore, some speakers in America, I heard, change the subject to stress. Then everybody likes to hear. When you want to listen to a talk about stress, many will come. If you want to talk on suffering, nobody would like to come. So we have to replace suffering with stress. So we need to know how to manage stress. That is the important aspect. Managing stress. Management always needs some principal characteristics like recognition. I came up with this word earlier. I am coming up with this word again. Recognition is important. Whenever we breathe in, breathe out, we recognize. Pajanati. Asasanga, pasasanga, pajanati. Digang vasasanto, digang asasamiti pajanati. Pajanati is not just mere recognition, wise recognition. Wise attention, wise recognition is there involved. So recognition we can't forget. If you forget everything else, please remember recognition. But metta is unforgettable because it is all the foundation. Appreciation is the next quality that follows our recognition. Whenever we recognize our breathing in and breathing out, we experience certain qualities in our heart. It will calm down. As Venerable Mahinda said, sometimes the blood pressure has gone up. I also noticed that. But after some time it calms down. That's true. All this we can recognize. And then this recognition should be selfless recognition. If we selfishly recognize, we can't easily appreciate. If we selfishly recognize anything that we gain, we cannot enjoy. Therefore, it is very important to recognize selflessly, altruistically. If you recognize selflessly only, you notice calming. And then it will result enjoying. It will result more and more appreciation. So these two qualities, although I just summarize them into two, there are more characteristics involved in this. Recognition follows calming, if it is done selflessly. And then you find more and more recognition, of course, connected with whether you are involved selfishly, with I conceit, having a big I behind, then you may even smile to them. And then you will see your recognition itself matures. It will develop eventually. So then you have more and more points of appreciation. When you appreciate, joy comes, happiness comes, tranquility comes, calming further, and then concentration comes. Samadhati. And all these will help us to transform suffering, transform stress into through seeing and knowing. We see and know means we recognize. Jnanam passang, these two qualities, knowing and seeing. Whatever we see within, whatever we know within, then it will give us a little transformation. If you do it from all around, parinyayam, parinyata, if you have perspectives, knowing, seeing from many dimensions, that is what is to be done to dukkha. Dukkhang parinyayam. Dukkha should be known from many angles, from all around, comprehensively. Then what will happen? This is the result, transformation. Dukkha will turn out to be saddha. Dukkhopanisa, saddha. When dukkha gives us a proper understanding, we don't have to hate dukkha anymore. If suffering gives us hatred, we don't anymore carry on with hatred. We reflect on it and we smile because we have recognized selflessly. Then we can appreciate. Then the confidence develop, saddha develop. Saddha jata upasankamati. We go further into the Dhamma practice with saddha. Saddha is heart into or heart onto whatever we practice. Saddha in Sanskrit, saddha. Sad is hridaya, that is heart. Dha is to put. If you put your heart on something, that is loving kindness as well. And that is again saddha. And that confidence results in many more positive qualities. Joy, it will give rise to joy. It will give rise to rapture, that is part of happiness. And still it goes on to tranquility and happiness, that is sukha, well-being, wellness. And that will give rise to concentration. And it will give rise to more knowledge and vision. It will give rise to detachment and, disenchantment, nibbida, disenchantment. And it will also give rise to dispassion. We are not attached to anything. Letting be is there, letting go. And then emancipation, liberation. All these qualities taken separately, we can remember the sayings that I summarized earlier. These qualities themselves are the path. Saddha is the path, not the result. Liberation is the path, not the result. So we need to make it the path. And when are we going to start the path? Here and now. You have already started. And we walk it. So walking the path starts here and now. So we need to have beginning anew continuously. Beginning anew. We have to start the path. Every morning we have to start the path. So we start walking metta. Knowledge of destruction of pollutants is the last in this context. These are there in the transcendental co-arising, transcendental dependent arising, Dukkha Upanisa, or the Upanisa Sutta, Upanisa Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. I just wanted to show you some pictures like this, which I took when I was traveling to about 40 meditation centers in Sri Lanka for my research. I was interviewing monks and nuns and lay practitioners. Before I finish my thesis, maybe I will interview Dr. Ariyaratna as well. Of course, I have been connected to Sarvodaya for a long time, so I don't have to interview Dr. Ariyaratna. I can see the heart of metta in him, as well as what is represented over here. So, our history of meditations, meditation is a wrong word, of course, but it has to be accepted now, because world has accepted it. Because why I say wrong is, meditation is limited to kind of mental culture only. What about our physical culture? Even physically we do a lot of things. We also do a lot of things verbally. All these should be connected to metta and connected to all these practices. What is called bhavana includes all these. Bhavana should not be translated into English. Of course, we have to use English words so that many understand. Therefore, we use meditation. Otherwise, meditation is so limited. Bhavana is more open, because bhavana has personality development altogether. Verbal, physical, mental development altogether. That attitude we need. So, meditation in Sri Lanka then and now, I say, one meditation center in the forest I noticed in the on one side modern looking, and the other one old looking Padhanagara, that is in Retigala. New meditation path, walking meditation path, and on the other one is in Retigala, a walking path. You find meditation paths like this too, in Arankali, little bit round. I just purposely took this. Just not to say that we should have to have one-pointedness always. One-pointedness is misleading sometimes. We take ourselves just for one point, which is impossible. At least 2 points you must have. Heart and head. The emotional and the intellectual. Connected. Even one point is one point of many things. Collectedness, samadhi is collectedness. So these round paths do not encourage one-pointedness, to my understanding. Ground plan urinal stones are there in Anuradhapura. These are old urinal stones in Retigala. Why I show this is the concern when they go to toilets, when they urinate, etc. They even concerned nature, important. They did not want to destroy nature. If you search archaeological sites like this, you may see some 7 pots filled with some stones and so on. Each pot will filter the urine, and it will be purer than water when it goes to the earth. And that sort of preparations are there concerning environment those days. I met these venerable monks when I was traveling on my mission on finding monks and nuns for me to interview on mindfulness practices in modern Sri Lanka, especially how they interpret mindfulness. Another monk I met like this in Nauyana. He also lives in a forest cave. And I heard that this venerable monk stays in this posture for 6 hours without any change. He looks very happy. He has a lot of metta. Without metta, I don't think that he could sit for 6 hours. So that is the devotion. That is the heart on the practice. If you have the heart on the practice, the result is you can sit hours and hours. But if you want to sit even a minute, you need to have metta. Otherwise, you don't have the devotion to it. So 6 hours or 1 minute, I don't discriminate. It's all right. 1 minute is as important as 6 hours. Whole day practice, round the clock, based on metta, based on loving kindness, based on all these characteristics that I reflected on. These are the summary that I find in the classical texts. This one I wanted to show you now, a surprise maybe. Dr. Charika Marasinghe sent me this particular greeting that happened in 1996 when I was at Oxford University. She sent me this preparation. She said that later on she said that this was prepared by her son, but her words maybe. And I wanted to conclude my talk just to honor her services here, just to honor, of course, the whole family of Sarvade, all of you, because Charika can represent these ideas, and she devoted a lot of time and her capacity organizing this, and as you have heard from her own father. And therefore, I wanted to conclude my talk with her words that she sent to me in 1996 as a greeting card on a Vesak day, that is, on the Buddha day. So the greeting card says, "May your awakened mind embrace the unloved. May your penetrating eyes capture the unseen. May your wondrous voice amplify the voiceless. May your sensitive ears hear the unheard. May your compassionate hands touch the sufferers. May your noble presence on earth be a blessing and bring peace to the world." Dr. Charika Marasinghe from Sri Lanka. Little drops of water make the mighty ocean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ratnayaka. That was an absolute privilege. Reverend Beckwith, over to you to open the floor for questions.
Give them both some generous appreciation for their presentations. For the next few moments, you have the opportunity to engage these gentlemen. Anything that was sparked in your awareness about what they had to say, epigenetics and hardwiring for compassion, and all of the wonderful things that were being said. If you have any questions or want to engage dialogue, I guess you would stand. Is there a microphone in the audience? And here's a question. There's two questions right over here. And you can direct the question to one or both of the speakers. This is not a 1, 2, 1, 2.
Thank you very much, Dr. James Doty. Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. My name is Victor Wee from Malaysia, and I'd like to direct my first question to you, because you do mention about mindfulness as the practice of mindfulness these days is taken almost out of the spiritual context, whereby the practice of mindfulness is to bring about wisdom and insight. But currently, mindfulness is being used almost as a strategy for stress management. And as a result of which, there is almost a disconnect. The real purpose of mindfulness is almost lost. It is only used as a quick remedy in order to solve stress. Should there be a reconnection so that practitioners of mindfulness are more aware about the actual purpose of mindfulness, because the practice of mindfulness will indeed lead to deeper insight. The second thing is that in the practice of mindfulness, as we have seen in the West, is also taken away from the practice of loving kindness. And should also metta itself also be reconnected with the practice of mindfulness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, and in fact, that's one of the things that actually I've tried to repeatedly point out. There's a conference that's given, which I won't name, but they promote this mindfulness as you described it, and without the metta component, without compassion and wisdom, frankly, it can be hollow practice. And you can look at a tool and you can see how that tool can be used best, but you can also use the tool not necessarily the way it was originally designed. And I think that while we know that these techniques of mindfulness can decrease stress, if you will, or suffering, without the other components, again, I think there is a danger that it may help you on the short term, but it doesn't really give you what you need, which is the other component, which is the metta, which then allows you to connect more effectively. Now, if you talk to people who promote these practices you describe, and another is I've spent a fair amount of time with John Kabat-Zinn, who's the person who has brought mindfulness to the West, if you will, and he insists that embedded within his mindfulness practice is compassion. But he and I have gotten into discussions about this, and his response was, well, why don't you go on a retreat with me? But I agree with you, and I think they should be more consciously combined, because instead of just 1 + 1 = 2, I think it goes much further than that and makes 1 + 1 infinite.
Thank you, Dr. James. On that same note, sometimes these practices can be seen somewhat as a Trojan horse, that it enters in seems to be for one purpose, but it ends up transforming the individual's consciousness. I have a friend that does tremendous biofeedback and a number of work in meditation, and he was funded by the United States government to work with the Green Beret. And he was teaching them mindfulness technologies in order to be telepathic, for them to do special projects that were of the violent nature. But what happened to these beings was that as they began to work with him, they began to quit the Green Beret. As they got deeper and deeper into the practices, they could no longer be soldiers. So the program was defunded. And so it started off one direction, but their real character emerged, and they hit it in a different direction. Someone wrote a question here. I guess it can be directed to both of you, but I think if I'm reading it right, it says, what is the natural relationship between geriatric and mindfulness? So I guess we're speaking about geriatric being senior citizens or aging or something to that effect. Whoever wrote the question.
You get older, and hopefully you get wiser. I think, though, one of the things one can learn. Oh, I like the other one. I'm gonna answer the other one. Actually, getting back to the other one of aging, though, I think that this type of practice, though, one of the things I see as a physician is that people have not gained self-awareness, and as they get older and they're at that stage where they're going to pass, instead of passing and being joyous, they cling and they have attachment. And it makes that passing, I think, quite difficult, versus these types of practices actually bring you to the point where there's great joy about combining with the oneness that is there and that embraces of us. But getting back to the more mundane, which is the genetics question, mindfulness and genetics. There's a fellow by the name of Steve Cole at UCLA, and he's been working on this area. And it's fascinating that even with short interventions, as short as 15 minutes, you can actually see the effects of a mindfulness or metta practice or compassion with intent, how moment by moment there is actually a change in gene expression. As an example, there are certain genes that are associated with increased inflammation, and when one practices compassion with intent for as little as 15 minutes, you actually see a decrease in the expression of those genes. So we know that mental practices, these types of practices, can have a profound effect. The other interesting thing we're learning is that inflammation is actually a occurrence that is very, very deleterious to our health. When we are stressed, especially in this environment where we're distracted by so many things, and our threat mechanism is always at a low level, or what we call a hypervigilance, we release these hormones that promote inflammation, and as a result, the effect of those hormones on your cardiovascular system and on other parts of your body really have a profound negative effect. So these practices give you the ability to, again, as I said earlier, be at your physiologic best. And you are best when you are in service to others, you connect with others, and you embrace others.
Did you want to add to something?
I am not good at genetics. Therefore, I don't touch upon that aspect in front of a great scholar in genetics. But I can say from my heart what I have understood on metta, connected with that particular area or that particular aspect as a Buddhist scholar. I used to say, whenever I visit a patient at a hospital, just to give a moral support, don't matter however sick you are bodily, don't let your mind become sick. Reflect on whatever you have done and make your mind healthy enough, however unhealthy your body becomes. We forget this whenever we are sick. Lying in a bed in a hospital, we may sometimes get depressed, however much we have practiced. But if you can remember that you have gathered here one day like this, or somewhere else, practicing metta together, practicing mindfulness, all these you can remember. And that reflection gives you happiness, joy. And you are not all by yourself. You are with so many qualities with you. And Buddha is with you. Buddha is the embodiment of great compassion and wisdom. So Buddha is always with you if you develop these qualities. Developing qualities within is the way to develop the Buddha within. So to be with the Buddha means to be always on a safe side. That is the true practice of metta. So if I say to myself, may I be well and happy, may all beings be well and happy, is that enough? We need to also apply it deep-heartedly, from the best meaning of it, the most important meaning attached to it, as Buddha says. However old we are not old. However sick we are not sick. Because we have metta that embraces us, that overwhelms us, that makes us change our attitudes completely. So it is a transformation of attitudes. If you can transform attitudes completely, complete transformation of attitudes as a psychological victory over suffering is what is called Buddhahood, is what is called enlightenment, is what is called whatever you gain as the target of your peace and harmony. So if metta is forgotten, whenever we need metta, like when we are alone, when we are sick, when we are dying, what is the use of our practice? So please remember, this is very powerful. We have to be with metta even when we are alone. Even when we are terribly sick, we are not sick. We are healthy mentally. Thank you.
Thank you. This transformation of attitude is very important. We're going to take one more question, but on this whole field of genetics, our friend Bruce Lipton and Dr. Joe Dispenza both speak about this very tellingly in the Biology of Belief and in the book The Placebo Effect. And they speak about the fact that years ago, doctors used to ask their patients about their parents and what diseases they had. But we now know that's falling out of favor because they know they have the same diseases, not only because of genetic coding, because they have the same attitudes, the same diet, and the same lack of exercise. So now they are aware through periods of meditation that the epigenetics changes moment by moment, so that after a period of meditation, your whole DNA changes and your attitude changes, so that there's not, as you were saying earlier, it's not a fixed situation, it's malleable. And so through the practice of mindfulness and meditation, we shift our attitude, have a transformation, and even our genes change. We have designer genes by the great power of the universe. We have one more question, and I don't know if I want to be the one to choose the last person. You want to choose the last person? Oh, he already has the microphone, so the choice has already been made. Go right ahead. Want to use this microphone?
One question here and one question for you.
Good morning. I'm Venerable Ratanananda Bande from Bangladesh. Actually, I'm one of proud student of our teacher Sumana Ratnayake. I have one question to our teacher. Teacher, you have mentioned on your presentation that the breathing and recognition go together. What we had learned according to Abhidhamma, by the matter factor come chitta. It means nothing goes together, two things. So does it mean that the recognition and breath goes together, or in the same time, or breath come and recognition come after? And this is for you, one question, and I have one question for you too. If there is any books about the Buddhist meditation and neuroscience, I mean, according to your workshops? Yeah, this is my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with you, the recognition and the breath. You want to go to, did you hear your question? Okay, we'll start with you, then we'll come back and get your question. That will be the final question.
So, two things are not possible at one moment. Is it what you mean, according to Abhidhamma? Actually, Abhidhamma should be understood from a different point of view. Abhidhamma is an abstract teaching which is summarized, so we might misunderstand most of the cases sometime. Abhidhamma never says that it's only one thing, one atom. No. Even atom is analyzable. So therefore, there is no one thing as such. Even when you say one thing, it is a collectedness. So it is not just one thing. It is collectedness always. So collectedness of processes you can't find. If we just misunderstand, ekagata as one point, one-pointedness in a different sense, I mean, just to say atomic sense, so one single thing is wrong, I think. That's my view. So it is a collectedness of things. Samadhi is a collectedness of wholesome qualities. So metta can be connected with loving kindness. Mindfulness. So whenever you practice breathing in and breathing out, it is not separable from metta. Because you will become happy. You will become relaxed. You relax yourself. You calm yourself. You become healthy mentally. What is that? May I be well and happy is already there. Although you don't practice metta separately, whenever you practice breathing mindfully, metta is done already. So this way, metta is connected to whatever you do happily, peacefully, wisely. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I did not understand the second part of the question. Could you repeat it for me?
Hold on 1 second.
He wants to know whether there are any books on neuroscience. Yes. Whether there are any books on neuroscience.
Yes. If you go to our website, which is CCARE, C-C-A-R-E, CCARE, which stands for the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, ccare.stanford.edu. But there are a few books. One is by a colleague of mine named Dacher Keltner called The Compassion Instinct. And then there's one called by a woman by the name of Begley called Change Your Mind, Change Your Brain. And but there are a number, and we have a whole bibliography of books, and we have a listing of all the latest research in this area. And the other thing that we have is actually something called, we have a YouTube channel, and I actually do conversations with individuals who, by the actions of their lives, dedicate themselves to compassion, and they can be scientists, they can be actors, actresses, they can be spiritual leaders, or business people. But those are, I think, interesting as well, because it talks to people about their background and what motivated them to lead a life of compassion. And there are dialogues with Thich Nhat Hanh, with Amma, with Sadhguru, with Eckhart Tolle, and a variety of other spiritual leaders. And hopefully I'll have a few of the people here as well at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Now this is the very last question. To Kharam Dete.
It's not working. Oh, it's working. How do you develop the willingness for mindfulness? How do you develop an attitude for mindfulness? We all understand the need for metta and goodwill, but how do you develop it? How do you develop the attitude for it? That's my question. Thank you.
To both speakers. Start with Dr. James.
Well, are you asking me as an individual, or how does one create an environment in which one promotes metta or kindness or compassion? Me, or on the... Well, first of all, I think on some level you have to be ready, but the other aspect, though, is it also depends on your environment. When you are in an environment where the people who either you work with or your boss, those who employ you, create an environment that is selfish, that is not transparent, that results in suffering, it's very hard to get to that state, because oftentimes we respond to people how they respond to us. And if you are fearful and anxious, of course, that is the opposite of the mental environment that's necessary to open your heart. I get asked sometimes, geez, I either work in an environment which is as I described, or I've been offered a job, and it's like that, should I take the job? And my statement to them is, while certain aspects of that job may be appealing, you are in for a lifetime of suffering. And what one should try to do is to find an environment where it gives you the best environment to reach your own potential as a human being and develop yourself and practice metta. And what environment is that? That's one in which those values have been embraced by the entity. Otherwise, it's quite difficult, as you may have seen for yourself within the police department or in authoritarian environments. The manner in which oftentimes those environments function is by the creation of fear. Well, that is not an environment that is productive for the development of one's spiritual awareness.
May I add a point? Just accepting and appreciating the answer, I just briefly say something just to change our attitudes always is important. For example, I was visiting a kitchen somewhere in Colombo one day because I wanted to get some samples. I mean, whatever way they prepared the kitchen, etc. I wanted to see just to prepare my kitchen. So one mother said, "Oh, come dear son, kitchen is the second house of the Buddha." Then I asked, what is the meaning of that? I wanted to ask about construction. Can you not hear my voice? Is it clear? I just make it short. Any kitchen can be the house of the Buddha. What is the house of the Buddha? The Buddha should be living in the kitchen. How does a Buddha live in the kitchen? This mother said to me, when we wash dishes, if we are mindful, Buddha is there. If we clean the kitchen out of loving kindness, no jealousy, Buddha is there. So this way, any job can be transformed with our attitudes changing, with loving kindness, with the mindfulness practice to make the Buddha present. Buddha in the sense, your proper understanding, heart and wisdom is there involved. I think the question you asked, you have so many answers to it. Because all of you who came from India as great speakers, and also the great speakers, they have been practicing how to change attitudes in relation to many aspects of life, many problems in the world. So this way of changing attitudes, we all have to learn and improve our way of changing attitudes. In my teaching, I do apply this. I remind myself, I spoke like this, do I apply that when I teach at the university? Just to talk, not just for talking, practicing compassion, practicing loving kindness, making anybody start changing the attitudes with loving kindness so that one will benefit from these great values, sublime qualities. Thank you.
If I just...
Thank you, Mr. Ratnayaka. Dr. Dori, do you have anything to add there? Or can we conclude this session because we are kind of running behind the schedule very badly?
I was just going to make one comment. And there's a Stoic philosopher by the name of Epictetus. And Epictetus understood he was a slave, and he had a view that while one cannot change external events, one is completely in control of internal events. And while you may be in an environment that is not particularly kind, your response to that environment can have a big impact, though, on how you reflect yourself to the rest of the world. It's as if it's raining outside and two people walk outside. One person may complain that his clothes are wet, that there's going to be a lot of traffic, that he's going to be slowed down, that he's going to be late, and that his whole day is ruined. another person walks out and said, "This is fantastic. This is what life gives life to earth. I'm very blessed to be part of this and thankful." Yet the two have experienced the same event. And so oftentimes it is how you perceive the event, how you respond to the event, that actually is the reality of the event, not so much the event itself.
Dr. James, both of your presentations. Transformation and transcendence are keywords that he left us with. Trans means to go beyond the present formation of your life that has manifested through your perception. And transcendence, to go beyond the personal mind and to embrace the meta of your own being. Thank you very much.
Our sincere appreciation to Mr. Ratnayaka, Dr. Doty, and Reverend Michael Beckwith. I'm extremely sorry. I know that there are a lot more questions in the audience, but we are way behind the schedule, and we want to make sure that our Mahasangha do not miss their dana time. So, with sincere apologies, I want to move on to our next item. In the meantime, most respectfully, Mahasangha, if you wish to proceed towards lunch at this time, it's just another 11-minute video that we have in our schedule. So, it's up to you to decide if you wish to stay here or you wish to proceed towards dana. So, going with the theme, the science of metta, I would now like to share with you one of Sarvoday's work in the field. Next is a video presentation on metta in the womb, part of the beautiful workshop Sarvodaya conducts regularly in different parts of the country for pregnant mothers, titled Holistic Approach to Motherhood. This video will show how metta can transform even the unborn child and can lay the foundation of the beginning of molding a wholesome person right from inside their mother's womb.
Vishwaniketan Peace Center, in its quest for peace, stresses on three basic factors: achieving peace and tranquility within our own minds, and perceiving the reality of life. Healing society, understanding people, happenings, and adopting a dimension of loving kindness. Communion with the environment, accepting and respecting the right to exist of other living beings and their links with the environment.
Misi Sansu sitin itu apa
Our sincere apologies, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like experiencing some technical difficulties at this time. So let's try and see. We want to make sure that you don't miss lunch either, and that we will not get too late for the next session. So let us proceed towards lunch, and we will see if we have enough time to play this video at the beginning of the next session. Our sincere apologies. And also, I would like to also make a request for those who are wearing headsets to please ensure that you leave the headsets on your seats. Headsets පාවිච්චි කරන නොනවරුන් සහ මහත්වරුන් කරුණාකර එම උපකරණ තමන්ගේ ආසන මත තබා දවල් ආහාරය සඳහා පිටත් යන්න. So we will make sure that we meet here at 12:45 p.m. to begin the next afternoon session at 1 p.m. Thank you very much.